Who do you know that is wealthy? How did they get that way? How did they come by their wealth? And how is it that maybe we can acquire some of that wealth from them? Perhaps they can invest in some of our ideas. And we came up with many ideas. We established a hospital. We established a free lending library. We established street lights in Philadelphia. And we began the process of paving the streets of Philadelphia. Now, I had to go to Boston. I had to go there on business. And so in one of the discussions in our junto, we talked about, can a mother recognize her son if she has not seen him for years? I had not seen my mother for years. My father was deceased. And I decided to go to Boston, and there I would go and visit my mother, Abaya Franklin. And so I mounted, we entered into a wager. We made a wager. They wagered that my mother would not recognize me. I wagered that she would. A mother can never forget her child. And so we wagered 20 shillings, 20 shillings. And so the day came, I mounted my horse. Boston was some 300 miles from Philadelphia. It took anywhere from 12 to 2 weeks, 12 days to 2 weeks to get to Boston. As I rode along, it was getting towards wintertime. It was very chilly. One evening I arrived at an inn along the way. And so I dismounted my horse and tied my horse to a railing, went into the inn and found there many men sitting around in front of a very nice fire, a roaring fireplace, keeping very warm, no seat available at all. And so I came in and I called to the innkeeper, "Please, sir, would you go out and give my horse a bucket of oysters, raw oysters?" And he said, yes, how unusual is that? And so he procured a bucket of oysters, a pail of oysters, and when he went out to feed my horse the oysters, all of the men got up from their seats and they went out to see this event, to see a horse eating oysters. And so I looked around and I picked the best seat for myself in front of the fire, and I sat down. And the men came back in very disappointed. They came in and the innkeeper said, "Sir, your horse would not eat the oysters." "Oh," said I. "Well, give me the oysters and then feed my horse a bale of hay. Thank you very much." So I had the seat by the fire. I continued my journey to Boston. Again, very wintry. Arrived at my mother's house and knocked on the door. By this time, she was letting out rooms. She came to the door and she was rather gruff. She looked at me. "Yes, what can I do for you?" I said, "Madam, I have traveled long and far. Do you have accommodations whereby I might spend the night?" "What do I look like? A Boston fishwife? This isn't a place for tramps that come walking by or riding their horses. Be gone with you. You can't stay here." I felt the shillings in my pocket just melting away. "Oh, madam, please." And I looked past her and I saw again a roaring fire, people sitting around the fire, some of them cousins of mine. And I said, "Madam, the fire looks so inviting. Please, let me come in. Let me come in, just to sit down for a spell, to warm myself and have a warm drink." "Oh, very well, come in, but you can't stay long." So she let me into the room, into her home. I sat down on a small seat around all these gentlemen and young ladies, and we began to talk, and we began to talk again. Religion, politics, philosophy, all these things which were of great interest at that time. And finally she came to me and said, "Young man, it is time for you now to leave. Unless you're be gone from here, you'll never find lodging for the night, and you'll have to sleep out under a tree somewhere and freeze to death. Get out! Get out!" And the other people sitting around the fire, "Mrs. Franklin, please, we're having such a wonderful conversation. Can't you just simply let him sleep here on a bit of straw next to the fire? Please, don't kick him out. He is such a wonderful conversationalist." "Oh, very well. But at first light, he's gone. He's gone." And so that night I slept on a straw mattress next to the fire. My mother put a servant girl close by to make sure that I wasn't going to steal the pewter cups or the flatware. Slept the night through and then got up in the morning. And my mother said, "All right, it is time for you now to be gone. Get out of my home. You've been here long enough." And so I went to the door and I said, "Madam, thank you, thank you. I have lost my 20 shillings. And she said to me, "Who are you? Where are you from?" I said, "I am from Philadelphia." "Philadelphia," she said. "I have a son who lives in Philadelphia. His name is Benjamin Franklin. Do you know Benjamin Franklin?" I said, "Know him? Know him? I stay in his home. I sleep in his bed." And her eyes widened. She said, "Who are you, young fellow? What is your name?" "My name, madam, is Neb Frank." "Neb Frank? Neb Frank? Neb. That's Ben spelled backwards." "Oh, Benjamin, are you trying to fool your old mother?" 120 shillings. It was wonderful. And so, I returned to Philadelphia. The junto continued to meet. I had gone back to England as a representative of the colonies to work with the Parliament to do away with the dreaded Stamp Act, the Townshend Act. These were taxes that were leveled on the colonies without representation. No representation in Parliament at all. And so I went there and I pleaded with the Parliament. I argued before the House of Commons. This tax is unfair. It needs to be taken away. And so finally, Parliament reversed itself and did away with the Stamp Act, the Townshend Act, and so forth. I stayed in England for several years. I could not get my wife, Deborah, to go with me. She was terrified of the sea. She was afraid of sea travel, scared of water, scared of the ocean. I could never convince her to go with me, and so I would miss her. And so one time I was leaving to go to England, and she said, "Now, you must come home soon. You must come home early because we're going to build a house. You know this." And I said, "Deborah, I will be back as soon as I can. I'll be back before you know it. Don't start building the house until I return." I left to go to England with full knowledge that she would begin to build the house, and she completed the house in due time. I loved England, but in England I discovered that there was a hatred for the colonists, for the colonies, for Americans, because they thought of us as an unruly lot, a rebellious lot. They were ready always to level new taxes on us. They were ready to send the troops to the American shores to beat these colonists into submission, to make them obey the rules and regulations of King George III. And so I found that England had turned against us. I loved England. I loved my citizenship in Great Britain. I loved the empire of England. I loved the king. When I went to England, I went there as an Englishman, and then after a short time, I left England to come back to America as an American. Upon my return, Lexington and Concord had been fought just before my return. I was elected to the Second Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress had done virtually nothing. And so I went to the Second Continental Congress, and there we worked on the Declaration of Independence. We talked about independency. Many of the colonies were against it. They wanted to remain loyal to England. They wanted to remain loyal to the king, because with the king we were safe, we were protected, so we thought. It took much debate. It took much debate and argumentation to get the Congress to at least allow us to draft a Declaration of Independence. And so 5 of us were designated to write the Declaration. Thomas Jefferson, in actuality, was the writer of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson was in the Second Continental Congress. Thomas Jefferson was very reticent. He rarely had anything to say in the Congress, hardly ever said anything. But could he write? A wonderful writer, a wonderful player of the violin. I loved music. I played the violin, I played the guitar, I played the harp, I sang. Thomas Jefferson played the violin. And so he is the one who composed the Declaration of Independence. I and the other 3 members of the committee went through it, fine-tooth comb. We crossed out statements, we wrote in statements, and finally we presented it to the Second Continental Congress. And so the Declaration of Independence became then a reality. Swear Chuck. This is the Declaration of Independence. Notice that the President of the Second Continental Congress signed his name in a flourish with very large letters, John Hancock. Someone made the comment, well, John, that's an awfully large signature. And he said, that's so that Fat George in England can see it without his spectacles. I signed it here. This is my signature, Benjamin Franklin, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. I will leave this for your perusal later after I depart. Thank you very much. Another one of my inventions was called the glass harmonica. Have you ever dipped your finger into a crystal glass and run your finger around the rim of the glass? You know that it makes a very pleasant, a very mellow sound. One of the attractive things and interesting things that would happen in salons, an artist or musician would come in with a tray of wine goblets, crystal goblets, each with varying levels of wine in them. And he would dip his finger in and rub his finger around the rims of the glasses, making beautiful music. I watched that, and I thought to myself, that's very impractical. What if I were to have crystal bowls blown to different sizes, put on a spindle horizontally, have a tray of water there, a crank at one end, or a pedal, which the musician could push the pedal, turning the crystal bowls on the spindle, dipped fingers into the bowl, and then placed them on the spinning bowls. Made beautiful, harmonious music. Mozart composed music for my harmonium. Beethoven composed music for my glass harmonica. And so that was the last of my great inventions. I went to France. Oh yes, thank you. This is a sketch, if you will, a charcoal of the glass harmonica. Again, we'll make this available to you for your edification. I went to France after the signing of the Declaration of Independence to be the commissioner to the French government. The Revolutionary War had started. There was no way that the colonists were going to win the Revolutionary War without help from some other country. And so I went as a representative of the Congress to go there and to enlist the aid, the help, the investment of the French government. I went there and oh, I fell in love with France. France was the most civilized country in the world. I loved being there. I loved going to the salons. French were very hospitable people. They would ask you, what do you like to eat? And if you were to say mutton, and then every meal you went to, they would serve mutton. Somehow the word got around that I loved the ladies. And so every now and then ladies would be presented to me, or ladies would present themselves to me. And I would approach them in the French fashion. I would not kiss them on the lips. that would be rude, that was considered rude. I would not kiss them on the cheek for fear that it would wipe off some of the paint. I would kiss them on the neck with an embrasse, a simple kiss on the neck. The women loved me, but they referred to me as Papa Franklin. I was like a grandfather by this time. I'm in my 70s, and so there were no dalliances there whatsoever, but I would go and visit the ladies. I did propose marriage. At this time, Deborah had died in Philadelphia, and I proposed marriage to the Lady Helvetia, but she refused me, she being Catholic, I being a Calvinist. There was no way that marriage could ever occur. But I eventually enlisted the aid of the French to come to our aid, to come to our help in fighting the Revolutionary War. And so I had signed the Declaration of Independence. I had signed the Treaty of France, which effectively ended the Revolutionary War. And then when I returned to America, to the United States of America, I was elected to the Constitutional Convention. By this time, I was 80 years old. I was actually 81 years old. I was very weak. My knees were weak. I couldn't walk very well. They would carry me to Independence Hall in a sedan chair. I would go into the Constitutional Convention. Quite often I would fall asleep. I slept there, but I would wake up at key moments when key votes were taken. We hammered out the Constitution. We didn't think the Constitution would ever be voted for. We didn't think that if it were voted for, that it would ever last at all, because it was just a hodgepodge of writing, thoughts, philosophy. We got through the writing of the Constitution. It was voted for. And then I was asked to give a final speech. This at the Constitutional Convention. And this is an excerpt of the final speech that I gave. It astonishes me to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does. And I think it will astonish our enemies, who are just waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded like those of the builders of the Tower of Babel, and that our states are on the point of separation, only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting one another's throats. Thus, I consent to this Constitution because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best. On exiting Independence Hall, a crowd was standing in front, and a woman yelled out to me, "Well, Dr. Franklin, what sort of government did you give us?" And my response was, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." I leave you with that thought this evening. You have a republic. A republic if you can keep it. You must work to keep the republic. You must work to keep this land free. You must work to honor the memory of those who shed their blood for freedom and shed their blood that this country, the United States of America, would be strong and free. A republic if you can.
Desserts and coffee, and we will return.
Oh my goodness.
That was almost phenomenal. That was really,
Oh my my goodness. Boy.
That was good.
Yeah.